AJ, hello and welcome to Cinema, Life and Everything. How are you today?
Yeah, good. Thanks for having me, man.
Oh, an absolute pleasure. Well, thanks for making the hour today to come and discuss some of the films that have influenced you most. And when you sent me over your choice, I won't lie to you, very excited. There's, I think all three of them are like three of my absolute favourite films anyway. So this is going to be a joy to like talk about these films to you and why they mean so much to you. So if you wouldn't mind, would you tell me the three you've chosen, please?
Yeah, so the three I chose were influential in my upbringing. We'll talk about that later. But Bloodsport, Jean-Claude Van Damme, Rambo, which is obviously Mr. Sylvester Stallone, and Leon, or The Professional, depending on where you are in the world. And that is Jean Reno and Natalie Portman and Gary Oldman.
Yeah, an absolute scenery chewing Gary Oldman in that one.
Yeah, he's genius as a villain. I think he's made like True Romance as well. He's a villain in that. Like, he's just great as a villain in so much stuff. I love him in every time he's a villain.
He just has an amazing way of being able to shout differently in so many and exude this threat in every single way as well. But yeah, so where would you, sorry, I don't want to tell you about your films. Where would you like to start? Which one would you like to kick off with and why?
Yeah, we'll start at the beginning, I guess. Bloodsport's probably the perfect one to start. Yeah.
Kunte. No, so yeah, I mean, why Bloodsport? Why? Because it's just iconic. But why for you, Bloodsport?
I think, well, I nearly picked Kickboxer. They're very similar films.
Yes.
But like, I feel like Bloodsport is like my earliest memory of film that I watched as a kid. Other than like, you know, more kiddie, more family friendly things. 80s and 90s is a different era. We watched 18 rated films. Like,
yeah,
there was no such thing as sticking to age ratings. You know, and nowadays I feel like you have to stick a bit more firmly because the subject material can be worse than now than ever, but or like more impactful. But my journey pretty much starts with like, I pretty much grew up with my grandmother and my grandparents, and I would spend like many weekends with them. And they actually owned a pub. They were publicans. I'm actually I've Irish heritage, so I'm more Irish than I am English, even though I sound very English. And every evening in the pub, like my nan was like pretty much she'd do the admin, so she would like cash up the tills and whatnot. So there was a lot of evening time where she was up till like you know till the pub closed, and I would stay up with her basically and watch films. And she was a massive. My gran, this is obviously, she was a massive action nut. Like she loved every action film. Like I have her to thank for like my action film blood as an actor. I love action as a result. But yeah, we would stay up and watch all these great films. But Van Damme was like a big staple amongst other people. You know, obviously like the classics like Bruce Lee, Chuck Norris. Shout out to Michael Dudikoff as well for the American Ninja franchise.
Oh yeah,
they were like a big part of my upbringing. Yeah, I watched them. They were like, when they came out at the video rental store, we were like we were on like the waiting list for when they'd come out, knowing they were coming. And no matter how bad they got later as well. But no, Bloodsport is like anyway, sorry to digress, but Bloodsport
I love diversions.
Yeah, I will divert a lot. Sorry.
Good. That's absolutely fine.
No, Bloodsport is like very personal to me because it was my main influence into martial arts is my blood. I'm a martial artist through and through, as well as I am I'm there's two things in my life that I will never not be anymore, and that is a martial artist and an actor. And the martial arts is the thing I've been doing since I could pretty much walk, and watching Van Damme. My gran, I was obsessed with like copying him while we were watching it, and we watched it so many times, obviously, till the VHS broke. Every time I'd try and do his kicks, I'd be trying to copy the fights. And then my gran was like, I think, at 4 years of age, she was like, she told my mother, like, you need to get him into karate. Like, you need to go and take him. So, that was the start of my martial arts journey as a result. So Van Damme was probably my biggest influence into starting martial arts, other than Michael Dudikoff.
I always remember the first one, and it's a weird thing how things stick with you. But I remember as a child watching American Ninja, and one of the first things that happens, someone gets uppercutted very early on and falls back first onto a pickaxe that goes straight through his back. And it's just like that bit of unbelievable violence. I was like, oh my God, but like these days, you just wouldn't, I don't know, you probably would see it in films, but it was just sort of like thrown away. It was just some underling. You didn't even, I think it might have been just been a ninja. You didn't even get to see their face or anything. It was just like, yeah, someone's going to land on a pickaxe now.
Ninjas are the ultimate disposable bad guys, aren't they? Yeah.
Put a mask on and nobody knows it now. Yeah. But I was going to say something very wonderful you've brought up there already, the discipline of acting and martial arts as well, the linking of the physical to the mental and then also to the creative as well. Did you see the joins there quite early on? Was that something that sort of like making that connection between the three? Is that something that sort of lit up to you, or was it just something that very much the karate first of all, and did you find like any sort of commonalities?
No, I was very ignorant to start with. No, there's clearly a strong link, and I've talked about that many a time in sort of later life. Like, and I didn't find acting until I was truly until I was early 30s. So I made that that link much later on. But in my household, I was like, I didn't really know it at the time, and I say I was ignorant, but I grew up in a household where obviously my nan was like an action film nut, but one of my uncles was he went to drama school and was a director. And he was the other way. He was very much like all about watching, filmmakers' films, good acting. And he used to ridicule us, me and my gran, for watching like terrible entertainment, basically. And he'd be like, "We watching that rubbish for? Like, you should watch a good film," and like constantly make that comment. And we'd be like, "Shut up. Like, why not watch this?" But as a result, when he did influence my grandparents on watching stuff, I would be there and watch it as well. And it sort of, I subconsciously was probably really affected by him as well. And although I was doing martial arts, I didn't see that link. But the spirituality, the discipline, what I say now actually is I always recommend to actors, especially those that just act, I always say to them, my advice to them is you should do martial arts at the same time, because it gives you the spiritual and the physical to go with the emotional and the mental of acting, and you become more well-rounded as a result. I think there is a very strong link between the two, and you can see there is many actors obviously now more than ever. I think especially with the rise of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you've seen a lot of actors more recently coming out and saying that they have been studying Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and are black belts or various belts in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. But even someone like Downey Jr. is like a long-term Wing Chun practitioner, right? So many actors do both, and you can probably thank like Bruce Lee for that, because he sort of started that back in the day when he was sort of coaching actors in Jeet Kune Do, and they saw what he could do and they wanted to be part of it. I think even if actors don't use it, I think a lot of them find a lot of benefit in the spiritual and physical of martial arts.
I think it's a lovely yin yang as well, to completely get that analogy going, that martial arts or physical disciplines give you the receptacle in which you can hold the creativity in. It's like, if it's just unbound creativity with no physical links, your body's your instrument at the end of the day. So when you're acting, it's nice to be able to know how your body feels in certain positions, how to use your body to display certain types of emotion, and to be aware of where your body is in the space at all time. And similarly, martial arts, you always have like the warrior poet, you have like samurai learning poetry and calligraphy and stuff as well. So it's marrying all the influences, is finding the balance that works for you. And I think you mentioned Bruce Lee, and that was really similar to me as well. But also someone like Van Damme, going back to Bloodsport, that he was doing martial arts, but at the same time learning dance and ballet and stuff as well. Yeah. So exploring to that sort of like creative side as well, to give him the range of like abilities and different ways of telling stories using his body and his mind as well.
Yeah, there's obviously a big commonality or a common link between dancing and martial arts, and even something like capoeira, it's very culturally defined by dancing and rhythm and musically, a very musical martial art. my girlfriend is a graduado in capoeira, and that definitely spending time with her has taught me a lot about the musicality of martial arts. But you're right, like obviously Bruce Lee, cha-cha-cha, champion,
Yeah.
ballet, Jackie Chan, really good dancer. Many martial artists can dance pretty well, I guess, because of the flexibility and the dexterity, etc. that it takes to do that. And as you said, like with like back to the samurai with like Bushido, it was considered that to have ultimate control over, your weapon and self, you needed to be, I think it was Sun Tzu that talked about basically needing to master all areas of discipline in your life, and that included being. So he sort of, I think it was Sun Tzu talking about mastering being the carpenter, so being able to create and build your home, but then being the farmer, being able to sow seeds and live for yourself, and then be able to, like you said, paint or write. So you had the finer skills over your fingertips and building finesse in your work, and then the more brutal art of the sword and the martial arts combined with that. It was again that kind of harmony of, or yin yang, as you put it earlier, between all of those disciplines. And obviously, I think the best actors and martial artists tend to have a good hold on all of those areas and tend to be quite balanced people. And I think what martial arts gives you as an actor is it gives you the gift of adversity and how to overcome it. And where everybody says actors are best is when they've got lots of life experience.
Yes.
Martial arts gives you life experience through whether that's you do competition or you just stretching. There's a lot of struggle in martial arts that as long as you don't give up and you keep going, you learn a lot about yourself. And obviously that's what acting is as well. It's the rub. It's both parts of rubbing you continually to find out more of who you are.
And I think that's such a lovely way you've put it as well, because for me, it's always like it just gives you a bigger vocabulary. It's like the more experiences you find yourself in, even if it's something that wouldn't really inform a character you're portraying at that time, there still might be little parts of it. I just think, like basically what you said, the more life experience, the more you can find ways to plug yourself into other characters. And in ways, the more characters you play, the more it can sort of inform your martial arts, because it gives you a bigger range of emotions to work off as well. It's lovely how everything sort of like works back and forth in each other.
Yeah, and it helps you. I think what martial arts gives, again, why I always say actors should do it, is not even if it necessarily teaches you, you might have a good control over your emotions as an actor, and you might be able to, some people are gifted at being able to, cry on cue, or they've had certain life experiences already that they can pull upon very, very quickly. But I think what martial arts gives acting is the ability to go back to reset quite quickly. Like, you often, if you're a martial artist, you've encountered meditation, you've you understand that training can rebalance you. So I think that sometimes acting can be damaging, like you can be, recently I did a role which has sort of haunted me for a while. It really made me question myself, but by training and continuing the path and going back to what I know, it brought me back to balance and helped me whenever I do question myself of that role. I'm like, actually, I know who I am, and martial arts helps me find who I am again, if that makes sense.
Almost gives you like an emotional reset, because that's like the root of you. If you do that, then it can just bring you back. Well, yeah, I mean, if anything was a great advertisement for martial arts, you're right there. I think that's absolutely perfect. But in terms of anything else with Bloodsport, apart from an absolute banging soundtrack that's still on my gym playlist today, we had the sort of icons. We'll go on Stallone in a minute, but I remember like late 80s, early 90s, there were a lot of muscle bound people. And then Van Damme was in incredible shape, but then his big calling card was like the flexibility. And I remember, obviously you had Bruce Lee before that, but I remember that after Van Damme, I started to notice that a lot more, that it wasn't just about guns and stuff. The martial arts became a lot more prevalent in Western cinema, and also having dexterity and flexibility. These sort of become calling cards as well. It was very interesting. Is that something you sort of picked up on as well, or appealed to you?
Yeah, definitely. Like, I think, as you said, I would also say that I have quite a personal opinion about films from the 80s and 90s, is that I actually think majority of the time, it's in the action world anyway. Let's consider Bloodsport part of the action and martial arts genre, right? That genre is quite specific in that often what we have nowadays is we have like weak acting over incredibly physically gifted performers. So they can physically do incredible stuff, but the films are becoming more about trick, show pony, kind of show me what you can do, as opposed to show me how well you can act. And I won't mention any names, but there are some amazing films I've really enjoyed, but I've enjoyed them more because I'm watching them physically than the story. Whereas something like Bloodsport, I think the reason some of these films are so successful back in the day is whether you like Van Damme or not, I think he was emotionally gifted and actually a really good actor. I think he was capable of being an incredible actor when he wanted to be. And obviously something like Time Cop being his sort of ultimate high, where, Hollywood recognized him as being a good actor at that point, and he did something which sort of bled everything that he did well together. I think Bloodsport just showed, as you said, physically gifted, good looking guy, that could act and pull off the story, and you believed it. And even watching it now, you watch it back, you don't think this, it might be cheesy, but you don't think it's bad. You just think it's of the era. And like you said, good musicality, soundtrack, interesting characters like Bolo, and the other fighters. And I think that and the story was solid. You don't really see many tournament films these days. It's not really a done thing anymore, but it was really the birth of tournament films, right? I think you could probably look at Bloodsport in a lot of like popular culture, like Mortal Kombat probably was very heavily influenced by Bloodsport. I mean, Johnny Cage is basically meant to be Van Damme.
I know an interesting story about that apparently that was meant to be a vehicle. Mortal Kombat was meant to be purely a vehicle for Van Damme, and the Johnny Cage character was Van Damme, but they couldn't agree on the price. So they just stuck on that. There you go.
Yeah, no, that's what I mean. It's so influential, like culturally. Like, and after that, how many tournament films sort of came out? You had like Street Fighter as well, the video game. They probably would openly admit they were influenced by, like Van Damme, Bloodsport, and such. Anyway, very influential film. I think, just like not really anything has come along since that sort of holds a flame to it in terms of like storytelling, visually impressive fights, and without kind of going too far into the absurd, right?
Yeah, and I think for me as well, when I've actually done some research into it recently, how low budget or what small budget they had, how they didn't really expect much from it, and it was Van Damme's like shot, but they were like, they just sort of, even this is from a Van Damme interview, they more or less just felt sorry for him. So they said, oh, go and do this, we've got this script here, maybe it will be something for you. And just his passion and just catching that lightning in the bottle. And I think that's a big thing that really speaks to me as well, that it doesn't really matter about budget sometimes. It doesn't really matter about the whole highbrow, lowbrow argument or whatever. If something emotionally resonates, it can become a blockbuster. It can just win over so many people because it's something fresh and new, and you can see that people cared about it, people believe in it, and that starts to resonate with people as opposed to when you get a form of entertainment or a certain type of film where loads of people are jumping on the bandwagon and it just becomes just another franchise or just a slightly different version of the original. To have something that is so unique and so passionate, like I say, inspires a new generation.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, I mean, arguably no sequels worked after that either. Van Damme being a unique entity, he didn't do any sequels from my recollection of any of those films, from No Retreat, No Surrender, Kickboxer, Bloodsport. They were all sequeled by other people and none had the same impact that he had. Yeah, and I think the low budgetness, I think he even said recently, right, didn't he? I think they did the Bolo fight in it was like a few hours or a day.
Yeah.
But obviously I think, even though that's impressive, of course it's very impressive to say that, and obviously low budget makes it hard. I think we have to look at there's always that you have to, if we look at filmmaking, action filmmaking now and martial arts filmmaking now, and the over tendency to do cool moves over good acting, it takes longer as a result because all these cool moves are higher risk. They take longer to set up, whereas the moves were achievable by, everyone could achieve it, even though Van Damme was executed at a very high level. There was nothing he was doing that wasn't like, so absurd it needed a whole day's setup.
Yeah.
It was like, as you said, that kind of lightning in a bottle, catching everything together, but at the same time, his abilities being perfectly suited to a one-day fight meant that they could do a lot in not much time with a budget. But I think he's the last of a generation. He's a very unique guy. I think he's retired now, right? I think he's officially retired recently.
Yeah, he's that's it for him now. But there was actually something I just got to say there. You just said such a pro wrestling thing about it's not what you do, it's why you do it. So when you do a certain sequence of fights or something, it's like, what is the emotional impact of this, as opposed to, oh, look, I'm just going to do a cool thing now. I'm going to do a flip.
Well, I'd argue wrestling has gone in a similar direction.
100%.
Wrestler, you would. I know we talked about this before. My favorite eras, and I'm sure it's yours and most other wrestling fans, is like obviously the Attitude Era and WCW and ECW. All of that kind of crossover of the competition before it all got bought out was, the characters, they weren't super technical or super athletic, although definitely juiced up in some cases, but they were characters more than anything else. Like the Steve Austins, Dwayne Johnsons, and not. I think once that torch got passed on to what the newer generation, it became about like being overly athletic and again about high performance moves over being great on the mic. And I think I'm hoping that both, wrestling and martial arts action filmmaking can go back to, we need good, solid storytelling alongside our action. And we can still do the cool moves. We just have to set that around a really awesome film. And in wrestling's case, we need some really well-written characters before we work on moves that are just eye candy.
And there you've just completely sort of managed to distill a private chat room I have with a load of other listeners into about 10 seconds right there. So where would you like to go next? Leon or Rambo First Blood?
Yeah, let's go sequentially. Let's go Rambo, because it's probably in a similar conversation. It's almost a similar conversation, isn't it? I only watched this recently. I actually even said last night, I was saying to my girlfriend, like, we need to watch Rambo again. Like, we need to watch the first one again. And that's because I saw a TikTok video of just a little segment of an interview with him that's just been released recently.
All right.
Or it might have been released a long time ago, but I only saw it recently. He basically was talking about how, so good segue here, is that Rambo, much like Bloodsport, was, on all intents and purposes, should have been terrible. The novel was, or the book that was written on was obviously successful and enjoyed, but when they made the film, I think Stallone said originally it was 3 hours long. And he sort of pontificated these terrible lines throughout the film, and he said one of the things he's quoted saying he spent an hour and a half running around the forest, and there was just lots of unnecessary footage. And the way they saved it, I think he said, actually before I said that, I think he said him and his agent, it was so bad that they went out into an alleyway together and retched together.
Oh, wow.
And two, they tried, it was so bad, they tried to buy the negatives and burn it because they thought,
oh, wow.
Yeah, but the way they saved it is, Stallone being a, very masterful character that he is, and I think not driven by ego, is he felt the way to save it was actually to cut out all of his lines and have people speak about him in the film instead. And so, by reducing the film down to an hour and a half, and also he wasn't even like Rocky. He wasn't first pick either. They chose loads and loads of different actors before him, and he was last pick again. And if you look at Rocky and Rambo together, they're just absolute classics.
Yeah, so iconic. Yeah,
that makes it even more epic when you think about the story he tells about how bad it could have been. We could have watched a 3-hour terrible film that killed his career, but it's a career defining role that went on to make 5 or 6 Rambos.
It was, and watching it back, I actually watched it back the other day, and the Last Blood was interesting but hyper violent. But then it sort of, between 1 and 4, they sort of more come back to the emotional side again. I mean, they're all big spectacle. Actually, no, the first one isn't really a spectacle film at all, and the violence, although there is some violence in it, it's actually quite dialed back. It's more the like you say, people explaining what he's about, and then at the end it's a big explosion and eruption. They put, you know, he keeps saying don't push me, but eventually they do push him enough. But that's Stallone blows me away in that film, that everything is kept so internal and all just portrayed through his eyes and the hell he's gone through. And yeah, and a few like monologues he has, particularly the one at the very end of the film, are just absolutely like heart-wrenching, like Oscar-worthy, incredible stuff.
And the monologue, I think the monologue at the end of the film, he should have been dead by the book writing standard, right? He should have, they're meant to have, you know, the original cut had him die at the end, just like in the book.
Yeah.
And the test audiences liked him so much that they had to go back and reshoot the ending for him to survive. So yeah, he lived. So again, we wouldn't have the amount of Rambos we have if they'd stuck to the book. Yeah, I mean, he's incredible in it. Like I'd say, like Van Damme, Stallone's been very influential in my life, and I think I'm a massive fan of. I think I'm out of everybody on the planet in terms of, you know, actors, directors. You know, he does everything, right? So
yeah, unbelievable
entrepreneur in the film industry in many ways. He's my most influential in terms of like, I would like to be like him, or I'd like to have a similar career to him, and eventually being able to do so much that he does, as well as being a great actor. I think he's again one of a kind.
I just think as well, we've spoken about discipline already, and the way he's able to keep his physique in order, and it's just his wherewithal, and just not so much as a brand. I don't want to reduce it down to a consumerist thing, but aware of where his strengths are, and just able to just get this buzz about himself, and again that passion, like, and it spills out into his painting and just everything. You know, he's even done a wonderful film he did called Paradise Alley, where he even sings the song at the end of it. But like, he's not frightened. He will, like, you could just say, oh, he's just a body guy. That obviously is part of him and his physical fitness, but he's not frightened to try all of these different ways to express himself. And I think he's such an influential guy.
Yeah, and I would counter that with something like Copland, where
he's
not in good shape deliberately. I think it's a shame that, you know, he himself has never won an Oscar, even though Rocky is an Oscar-winning film. You know, Stallone is. I do think he's an incredible actor, and I think he's probably not often mentioned as one of the great actors. But I think what he does well, like, you know, as you said, like Brand or whatever, he portrays the underdog perfectly. You know?
Yes.
He's not, you know, he probably would appreciate this, but started off probably not the best looking guy in the world. But everyone's always rooting for him. Like, you always want him to succeed. You want him to win. You want him to overcome. And he seems to get that. Most people in real life are in that bucket. We're all underdogs somewhere.
Yeah.
You know, it's easy to look up to him and be inspired by him, because, you know, he's a true tale of, like, he's a Cinderella story himself, you know, even down to his, you know, his history of like being in poverty and, you know, having to sell his dog. We all know that story now. If you look at his life that he's led, you know, it's even more special, these films. But I do think he's an incredible actor, and he works very hard and has worked over the years very hard at his acting. And I even loved, I think, the later Rambos and Rockies, and I shout out to like the first Creed film.
Unbelievable.
I think he's absolutely incredible as older Rocky, and, you know, he has, you know, spoilers, but he obviously has cancer in the film. The way he portrays the death of Adrian and where his life's going, the fact that, you know, every motivational speech has a snippet of him giving the line to his son in. You know, he's incredible. I think that he's not given enough credit for how incredible he is as an actor and influential he is in the in what he does. And often he still often talks about how even the latest Rockies and Rambos, he's had to fight really hard to have them made. The studios have said, no one wants these anymore. You know, we don't want these kind of films. You know, it's like people do want them. Lots of people want them. I mean, you could argue John Wick would be a success as it is without
100%.
Without that hunger. Anyway, I don't.
No, I think you made a really good point there as well, that we you know, earlier you spoke about like how action films and stuff, and how we, you know, what the old school sort of action films back. And I do remember when the first Expendables come out, and it was exactly the same feeling as when I watched the first John Wick. I was like, it was nostalgia. It was a completely new film, but at the same time, I was like, oh, hang about. This is how it used to be, like not much setup, but I really care. We're into the story. We don't need to do 1,000,001 fancy sort of fight scenes, but the story's driving it. But then the action is not even like, it's all supporting each other. There's no fat on it at all. Everything is done for a reason. Everything means something. And long after you finish watching it, it's still resonating with you. It gives you a buzz, you know, like and the thing about Stallone that I've always, that lack of ego in a lot of his films, especially Rocky, Rambo, the Expendables to a degree as well. He doesn't have to win it all, especially the first Rocky. It's more about and I think that resonates so much in me as well, that just giving it your best. And it might not be the outcome you wanted. You might not be the world champion, but you know what? When it came down to it, he gambled it. He tried for it. He stood up for it. You know, he didn't back away. And I think that, for me, in martial arts and competing and stuff as well, is so important. Just showing up for yourself, and then win or lose, you've made the choice. You've shown up for yourself. You've put the dedication in.
Yeah, I would agree. I think there's two things that are to his credit, and I would say not lack of ego, but he has a complete control over it. I think every actor, we all have egos.
Yeah, very well tried.
Projects, yeah, we walk up to projects and we're like, "What am I doing here? Why am I doing this?" You know, we get surprised later when it turned out to be good, or vice versa. We get really like, "Yeah, I'm the shit for this. I've got this amazing role coming up. I'm gonna be," and then it's terrible. You know, like, so you can go both ways. But I think he has masterful control over his ego, and I think that comes from the fact that he's also an incredible writer. Like he's wrote a lot from young. And he often says that he thinks out of all the disciplines, writing is the hardest. And I can definitely attest to that. Yeah. You know, I've written a little bit here and there. I created my own short film in the past, which did really well. We never released it, but it did really well. And that was one of the hardest things I did. And still now writing, I have many films that I want to make and ideas that I'm writing even now for myself. I find that the hardest part of the process. But what it empowers you to do is when you write it, you put the story first and then you put yourself second. And I think when you're going back to Bloodsport and all those beautiful films we said, is the stories were first, because no one expected these films to succeed. So they were good stories where, as you said, like, you know, everything came together at once, lightning in a bottle, and then they were brilliant. But the stories, you know, arguably did a lot of the groundwork, and then those guys had to just do the right things, and they did. And it's a testament to Stallone. Is I think he has amazing foresight on knowing what is needed to tell the best story over please his ego the biggest. You know, I'm sure his ego wants him to. He'd probably first say he'd love to do more films and he wants to do this, he wants to that. You know, we all want to do more, but at the same time, what he seems to have masterful control over is putting the storytelling first.
And I think that almost ties back into martial arts as well. No, especially like grappling arts, you know, but actually even karate and stuff as well. Knowing when to give and when to, you know, when to breathe in, when to breathe out, wax on, wax off, whichever way you want to do it. But understanding what is necessary in that moment and being in touch, in balance, you know, in knowing that, okay, this serves the story more than serves me. This is going to appeal more to the masses and just like stroke me and be like, oh yeah, that's incredible, I'm amazing in that bit.
Yeah It's like you said, I think, I mean, the fact that Stallone has done so many physical roles, you know, from boxing and whatnot, he's, even though maybe he's not known for being sort of a specific martial arts practitioner, he definitely has that same ability that you've already called out. And most martial artists or people who have done martial arts have that. I think where the danger is with martial arts is sometimes martial arts can make you too inward or too reserved. Because, you know, as most of us know from being a kid and doing martial arts, you're sort of told that martial arts is there for self-defense. Problem is self-defense means you're already defending before when the moment happens. And so if you're always inwards and always calming yourself and becoming almost too stoic or too complacent overall, it can have a sort of personality negative effect, if you know what I mean. If your goal is to be super calm and monk-like, it's great. But with acting, you actually need to be a bit charismatic. So you've got to have that balance between the two, and obviously acting and martial arts provides that, but obviously you can't have too much of one or the other, probably, really, without them affecting you slightly negatively otherwise.
You can probably get that thing as well that I always had, first of all, where so many people, it's like, you've got to do less, you've got to do less. And eventually you're sort of standing in front of a camera, just like, it's like
Less is, yeah, I was, funny enough, I had a great piece of advice as an actor in one of my first, like, when I sort of went back to acting in my 30s, young 30s. One of my coaches, a guy called Toby Wharton, said, actually, it's better to over deliver, to be a bigger actor than the scene, and then be reined back, than it is to be too small in the scene and then like having to be, you know, push forward. You know, easier to rein someone back. You know, you could look at all the great actors, and Jim Carrey is a great example of, like, you know, if someone could make overacting a positive thing, you know, Jim Carrey has done that like perfectly. And then I think, yeah, you're in danger more if you're too little in many places, especially on screen. You know, like there's the, you know, yeah, you could be what they call a focus puller and taking attention away, and there's a time to do it and a time not to. But in the acting world, I think it's knowing when to turn on the magic. You know, if you know you can do the magic, you knowing when to bring it and what scenes are the place to use it is just as key as knowing balance and when to pull back.
Yeah, that's a wonderful way of putting it as well. I was just thinking of Nicolas Cage as well. That's why I started grinning, knowing how to give those big sort of powerful performances that are so memorable. So the third one, and a film that I'm such a geek about, I have to admit, I own two versions of it. The French like director's cut and also the original version as well. Amazing. So amazing. Love this film. Absolutely love it.
Yeah, Leon, the Professional, right? So very recently, I was shooting a film in France, actually, at Provence Studios in south of France, which is like very famous French studio. A bit like kind of like you know, Warner Brothers or Paramount Studio kind of thing. And they have a massive. I'll share it at some point. I'll share it when the film I've done comes out. But I have in their lot, they have a massive mural of The Professional, which wasn't shot there. They just have all these beautiful murals of like iconic films like Enter the Dragon, some other films. And then there's this one isolated one on one wall, which was of Jean Reno and Natalie Portman on the roof when they're doing the sniper scene. Shooting the president passing by, or the mayor or whatever it is. I can't remember. Yeah, there's this beautiful mural that I took a picture outside recently, but that even the mural reminded me of like how iconic the film was, and how again that film is so, for me, that is truly a masterpiece film. Like, I think every character in that film is perfectly cast, perfectly set. The story is beautiful. They weren't afraid to kill the hero in the end. You know,
spoilers, by the way, you should have watched it by now.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, like you said, it's a geeks film. It's a film geeks film. Like, there's a lot about it. You know, iconography wise, it's beautiful. There's so much to it. But I just, you know, again, I hope I get to do a film like that in my career, because it's a storytelling masterpiece. And yeah, for me, it's like what that gave me was I watched it very young. And that was one of the films that my uncle made me watch, ironically.
Awesome. Okay.
Not my grand. That was the filmmaker's choice. And then that when I went back to acting in my 30s, it really taught me like again, that removing self, delivering great story, and being a great actor over anything else. Doing what you need to do to deliver the part to its best. That I feel like every person in that film did that, and obviously they're all stand out. I can't really give one person credit over the other. They're just all, you know, they're all incredible.
Even Luc Besson as the director, he's at the top of his game in that all of the smaller characters, they all feel real and fleshed out. Nothing's a caricature. Again, it's what we spoke about earlier on in both versions. Even the director's cut, which is longer, it asks more difficult questions about the Natalie Portman and Jean Reno relationship a bit more. But still, there's nothing in both cuts. There's nothing that just feels like, oh, you just put that back in there. And they both work perfectly well in their own ways. Both incredible films.
Yeah, and this is a great example of where they were not, they were not afraid to. I don't think they believed themselves to be an action film. I don't think they were like, this is an action film. It wasn't. It was a storytelling piece that had some action in it. Even for a great example of that is when Leon is hiding in the ceiling when the police arrive in the room, and he swings down from his perch, and the door shuts and he kills everyone, but you don't see him do it. You don't see this beautiful John Wick like moving between people, shooting them. Every shot has to be shown. Is the door shuts and you know what happened, and then you already give him credit. You just know he's a badass and you know that he's done his job. Everything he does is with like meticulous planning. And when he kills people in that film, like when he's in the darkness in the in the room and he garrots the guy, like it's like everything is like precise and everything is done without the intention of making you think this is an action film. It's not. It's a story. The story is what defines that film.
And I think as well, like same with First Blood as well. When you show restraint in the violence, it makes it so much more impactful. I think there's a lot more resonance to it, and sort of when I was watching Leon back, the musicality of it almost does. I mean, I know Oldman has the scenes in it where he's sort of dancing to music, but violence is almost used like an opera. It's very interestingly done. It's very European. That's the best way. It's very art house, but at the same time, it's what we were sort of speaking about earlier on with your uncle and stuff as well. It's violence and action is around the outside of it, but the story is what drives it. But it appeals to both. I know a lot of action people who absolutely adore that film, but it's the emotion that's keeping you there, because as far as fight scenes go, there's not too many in it. It's just more about you care about all the characters and what happens to them.
Yeah, and arguably the most impactful moments in that film and the scenes is that you don't actually see the end result. Like I said, the door shutting and shooting the police. Also, when he pulls the pin and he kills himself ultimately at the end with Gary Oldman, you know what's happened, and you're choking up knowing. And every time I watch that film, I shed a tear. Yeah, I mean, there is part of me that almost wants to see, it's the classic. Would I ever want to see a sequel? I want to see where Natalie Portman ended up as her character. And I think you could, but I just think some films also can't be done ever again. Like, Joe Pesci talks about Home Alone and saying that, the first two films he did are in his mind are like the only ones, because you just can't go back and recreate the innocence of the era and the way it was told. And I think Leon is a good example. As I just don't see how you'd make that film again, because it has, like you said, this art house quality, this filmmaker's film quality that I think that, there'd be a tendency now to make it, John Wick, go too far of it and, not rein the egos in enough, and it wouldn't be the same film. I think it wouldn't be able to live up to it. You can't make it better than the original in this case, I don't think.
And that's such a wonderful point as well, where a lot of films now do become franchises, and you have to be careful that, I don't know, but a lot of the time it's very rare that you'll get a franchise where it stays fresh and stays original. A lot of what happens now, whatever makes the original so popular, it gets highlighted and we'll do that more. We'll times that by 10. So this scene got really good reactions. We'll just do that throughout the film. And it's a shame, because then it loses its originality. It becomes almost just like 2.0 rather than like a continuation of the story. It's the same story with slightly different characters and slightly more heightened action, for instance. And it's a shame, because you lose the trueness of what made the original so popular.
But yeah, I agree. There's something more modern recently that I watched, off piece of what we've been talking about. But I watched this mini series on Netflix actually called Cyberpunk Edge Runners, which I think is based on the Cyberpunk video game universe. But it's a standalone series, so it's like 12 episodes. And cool. At the end of it, I was like, I won't spoil it. I definitely want people to go out and watch it. It ends, and the way it ends, you're like, I can't believe that happened. but I don't want it to continue. And it's so perfectly summed up and finished that you're just like, I would like to see more stories in that universe, because it's a universe that you're being brought into. But
yeah,
the story of those characters is tied off and done, and it makes it special that you're not going to see anymore. It's a one series, one time deal. And I was like, some things only need to be that. I don't need to see to appreciate and enjoy it. I don't need to see another one. I don't want to see 10, with the exception of some films are great as sequel films. Like I've loved pretty much every Rocky, with the exception of 5. I think even that has its moments. You know, and Rambo, etc. Like there are many films, using Stallone as example, there are many films where I've loved the sequels, like lots and lots of sequels. But when I'm buying into the universe, but there's also, I think there's not enough risk taking these days, and I think someone like Quentin Tarantino is a good example of not making sequels. Apart from Kill Bill, every film has been a one-time deal, and that's what makes it that bit more of an event and special, because you're like, I know this is over at the end, and I enjoy it for what it is, not what it's going to become.
I think that's so important in all art as well, is knowing where the song has to end, where there is some beauty in the finality of something. And I think whenever you watch a film, that if it's a good film, a good script, good acting, they existed before the film started. And a lot of the time lives will go on, even if not the main character, will go on as the film ends. And you have to believe in that, but you don't have to follow them forever. I think there's something very satisfying in knowing that they're confident enough in that work that they don't have to go back to it. You can go and tell another story. But we almost get into a conversation about art and commerce there as well, that sometimes it is because, oh, there was more story to tell, that you want to see Rocky win the belt or whatever. But sometimes in some franchises that you can just feel, oh, they're just rehashing. There's no new story being told. We're just trying to sort of milk it because there's value in the franchise.
Yeah, I think where things get lost is when you've got the parting of the original creatives moving the entity over to a studio or a production company, and then them just taking the rights to go and make more of them. When the original creators are involved, you tend to have a better output of sequels because they know where they were going to take it if it did become that. Whereas I think when another team takes hold of it, it doesn't always marry up. I can't think of many films where it's been handed off and the original creators have left and it's been better or the same,
So coming up now, the 3 amazing films, by the way. Thank you so much. So is there anything coming up in the future that you're interested in that's sort of leaping out at you at the moment, in terms, because it's funny, cinema seems to be going through a very transitional period at the moment, that there doesn't seem to be tons like that I'm aware of coming out now.
Well, as actors, we're in a brilliant time in some ways, and in other ways it's tougher. Like, so in the cinema era, the higher the cinema era before the streaming services kicked off, we definitely, you had the mega stardom, you had the, cinema was a festival celebration of every film, right? So when you got to the cinema in a film, it was a big thing, and you overnight you'd become a household name as a result, because there was a funnel to come and see these films. But with streaming services, to our benefit as actors, is there's a lot going on now. Like, every streaming service is trying to make the next big film. Things still go to the cinema, but cinema's not quite as impactful as it once was. Now you have a choice, basically, right? So I think, to answer your question, like, what I'm excited about now is is kind of spread thinly across a lot of stuff. What am I excited about in the cinema is different from what am I excited about from streaming services. And I make active choices now on, like, I'll wait for that to come to streaming, or I'll watch that in the cinema because it's a centerpiece. For example, seeing Avatar recently over Christmas, I knew I was going to only see that in the cinema because it's a film that almost feels like it's built for the cinema. And I feel like I'd lose something if I was watching it at home, on a streaming service. But then I watch a lot of martial arts action films on streaming because that's kind of feels like back when I was watching VHS. So what am I excited about right now? There's some sequels I'm interested in, like John Wick 4 is obviously coming. So John Wick's quite an exciting franchise that I've enjoyed. In terms of films that are out this year in general, though, I think I'm very led now by like what people are speaking about coming. I don't tend to look forward like I once did at cinema and be like, I need to see that when it comes out. Now I'm like, oh, what's coming out? Oh, that'll be interesting. Oh, I wonder what that'll be like. So everything's kind of an inquisitive nature rather than I have to see it, but kind of works because I kind of get surprised a lot.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with what you said there. There were certain films like Everything Everywhere All at Once I saw in the cinema, and I do think like I don't think it's like, oh, it's a death knell of cinema, because I still think, like you say, it's an event. It's a setting and a space where you go into, and it's like it's all about the film. You're just there to see the film. Well, I think sometimes it's streaming, it's something on in the background and doesn't always grab the attention as much. But they're both a lovely way of watching film, telling stories. And I think there's something very personal that when you watch something on streaming, that it's in your home, so it makes you react to it differently as opposed to all the lights going down and watching it on a big screen. They both have their way of...
I've definitely bridged that gap. Like what I guess probably like what I did over the lockdown period is I bought a projector and we set up, so we have like I wouldn't say we have a home cinema. I'm definitely not that wealthy. We just repurposed our like downstairs room and just a big white wall, and was like, you know what, let's chuck we have a training space that we created that was multi-purpose, and we were like, you know what, let's chuck some crash mats down, make them like mattresses, stick pillows on them and eat popcorn, and we can go to the cinema without going to the cinema in the lockdown. And that tradition still carried on. Like sometimes when I'm like in the middle of like, I don't want to see that at the cinema, but I kind of wish I did, or I missed it, I'll watch it on the projector instead with my girlfriend or my children. And it's like it's a good way to meet in the middle. You know, you still feel like you're getting a personal cinema experience, as opposed to, you know, there's definitely some moments where I'm so glad I went to the cinema, because as long as you don't get those kind of irritating customers that are like, you know, doing anything to distract you. Yeah, it can be additive. I remember watching Avengers Endgame, you know, and having that incredible moment that many people had, where I saw it at a reasonable everyman cinema. It wasn't big, it was quite intimate, but everyone there was a nerd. We went, you know, it was a geek like me, a Marvel geek, and it was like maybe, I don't know, there's got to have been like 50 or 60 people in the cinema, so it wasn't big. But we went to the midnight showing, and everyone there really felt every moment. So we heard the laughs, we heard the woos, the cries, and that was additive. That was like, you living it with all of us as nerds. We were just like, this is incredible. But you know, that's the power of cinema. Whereas you don't get that at home. If I'd watched that at home, it probably wouldn't have been as much of a enjoyment as I did have.
Well, the best thing about home cinema as well, I guess you don't get overcharged for the popcorn either.
Yeah, there is that. You can make your own. Definitely a big fan of making your own. My girlfriend makes incredible popcorn, so I'm that where you think it's like a simple thing to make, but when you can make it with such artistry, it's really amazing. But we often sneak it into the local cinema anyway. Nice. Try and get both. But yeah, it's you know, if you enjoy the overpriced popcorn in the cinema, you know, all power to you. But it's part of the experience, isn't it, I guess. Yeah. Well, AJ, listen, thank you so much, mate. They are 3 incredible films. People who haven't seen them, sorry if they've been spoiled a little bit, but you should definitely go and check them out as well, because they are just 3 absolute stone cold classics. So going forward from here, is there places where people can follow you, films you'd like them to check out with you in at all? Or yeah, I mean, feel free to follow me on like Instagram and TikTok and Facebook or whatever, all under the same handle, just AJ_North. If you type that in, you usually get me. In terms of films that are coming up, I have a lot of big projects. Last year was huge for me. Like there was like some game-changing projects I'm part of, but I can't announce them. So they're not Yeah, you didn't get the exclusive. Sorry, mate, not this time. No, it's all right. No, it's fair enough when it's all. No, there's some cool little projects I'm part of that hopefully will come out sooner, and I'll announce those on my socials and stuff. Amazing. But in terms of like things that are coming out, nothing announced yet that I can talk about, unfortunately. But some exciting things. So yeah, stay posted. Hopefully you'll see me in some very, very big stuff in the near future.
Watch this space, in other words.
To space, indeed.
Well, AJ, it's been absolutely amazing, mate. Thank you so much for your time. Time is precious, and you've just given us a lovely insight to you. And like I say, 3 absolute classics. So, yeah, have yourself a great day, mate. Take care.
Cheers, mate. Thank you. Thanks for having me.